My name is Cedric Bisson, or in French, Cedric Bisson. I'm venture partner at Terralist Capital. Terralist Capital is a fund of funds, so we invest in funds. We don't invest in companies, we invest in funds, venture capital funds. We focus on venture capital funds in three sectors: healthcare, life sciences, IT, and clean technologies. I'm focusing on the healthcare or life sciences sector. We have three main investors that have invested in Terralist Capital. The Investissement Québec, which is a division of the Quebec government, Caisse de dépôt et placement, which is a pension fund, as well as Solidarity Fund QFL. These are three investors. We have $700 million under management to invest in new funds, and we also manage a legacy portfolio of $600 million. So our activities in Canada are to invest or to create or facilitate the creation of venture capital funds. More specifically, we do three sectors, as I said before: IT, healthcare, and clean tech. I'm involved mostly in the healthcare sector, so given that I'm speaking with Biotechnology Focus, I'll focus on the life sciences portion of it. And so our goal is to invest in funds that will invest their allocation in Quebec, across Canada, and perhaps some outside of Canada. So we want to invest in funds that will generate a financial return, because if people don't generate a financial return, the industry is not sustainable. But we also have a mission to catalyze the ecosystem, i.e. we believe in the creation of high-performing companies, high-performing funds, in attracting the right people to that. So we also have a mission of structuring or evolving or catalyzing the evolution of the ecosystem of life sciences across Canada. We're big believers. Personally, I was in a direct fund before, and before that I was in international consulting, so we're big believers in making that happen. We think there's a tremendous opportunity across Canada. There are some great initiatives going on. The valorization entities in Quebec, Mars Innovation in Toronto, what CDRD is doing in Vancouver. There are some centers of excellence in commercial and research. So there is a lot of very interesting science, and our goal is to invest in funds that will, find a way to work with that science, amongst other priorities. Some funds are later stage, but some funds do that. So we're pretty pleased about that. And I think that and again, you should ask the funds that we invest in the question. You've also done so, but I think that there's a few items that are important. The first item is they have to work on things that are clinically relevant, not just an unmet medical need, but something that truly matters. A new mode of action for a drug, a new implantable device, some novel way to do something that's currently not being done, something that eventually will have a meaningful impact on the lives of patients, will eventually be reimbursed, but there's a clear business case. So I think that there is very little place today for what I would call incrementalism, just incremental stuff. So they need to be doing the right things, the right products. And this is very important, because no matter how good management is and all of that, if you don't have the focus on the right product, the right idea, then you'll have some issues. So that's item number one. There's actually right now a push to innovate, to create new things. So that's item one. The second item is, I think that the companies need to have a clear plan, a clear understanding of what it takes to create value of that product, and be realistic about it. Do they need to go? Probably they need to do clinical trials. What kind of clinical trials? How much does it cost? Where should they do it? What are the pros and cons? Because you're just raising money in order to have the right to raise more money later from other investors, unfortunately doesn't fly. Because as we heard earlier today in our panel, there are companies are financed through down rounds and all of that. So you want to avoid that. So you want to have enough capital to achieve a value creation point as opposed to a financing point. So they need to be aware of it. And if the answer is you need 5 million or 15, you have to raise 15 or 5, or higher, whatever the number is. So that's item 2. Item number 3 is, I think they need to be internationally focused in terms of their mindsets. What I mean by that is that they need to be out there and compare what they do with what is outside of Quebec, outside of Ontario, outside of Canada, even outside of the United States. It's because now it's a global market where innovations are benchmarked against one another. They need to be out there. They need to be, so if they're active in cancer or respirology or ophthalmology or whatever other sector, cardiology, they need to truly network globally and meet people, which means having the drive, the passion, the energy to go out there to speak to other, not only co-investors, but other pharma companies, other device companies, and truly create something which is great at an international level that happens to be based in Canada, Toronto, and Montreal. And these things do get financed. So these are the three things. How can that be done? Well, it's always the same thing. Great management and all of those things and great investors. But those three things are pretty important, and you need probably to be there. And if they're there, things do get financed, definitely. Definitely. I think that what they have to do is they have to, first of all, create a convincing story as to where that product fits in the treatment armamentarium. And it's difficult, it's easier for certain products, but generally it requires quite a bit of thinking. And me speaking with device companies, pharma companies, seeing where it goes, trying to see where the market is evolving, and creating a very clear, convincing business case for it. Number one. Number two, they can work with key opinion leaders in the sector that are truly innovative, the real ones, and they will all help them do that. They can also perhaps sometimes, speak with insurers or payers and that. And they can also get the buy-in of pharma companies to a certain extent. It's a long process, so it takes many, many months, sometimes years, to do that. But if you don't start at time zero, you won't get there when the time is out. After all, those products which are promoted to funds or discussed with funds or pharma companies ultimately may end up in the hands of a larger company, pharma, larger biotech, larger device company. But they won't do the deal if they see they've only seen you the last month. So you need to have a constant dialogue with them at the right level in the company and have very open discussion. If all products have pros and cons, and not the cons, but the issues of the products need to be disclosed, After all, it's risk capital, venture capital, and that's fine. You just need to have a very honest view about where it's going. I think that if you don't, so as I said, if you don't do the kinds of things that I've said, I think it will be very tough to raise. So if you have a Me Too product, some copy of something, then quite frankly, nobody has a lot of appetite for those products upon the acquisition and partnership side. So it's going to be very tough for you to raise. If you haven't don't understand whatever else is out there and how does your thing, invented in Toronto or in Montreal, fits or is compared to what exists outside, then it will be very difficult to fundraise. If you don't have the ability or the willingness to explore outside, to go out, to travel, to meet, to go to headquarters, you will be judged more negatively. So these are all things that need to be done properly. And I think if they are done, if you do them properly, you will probably be judged positively. The other thing I would add on top of that is you also need to understand the life cycle of the fund and the specific strategies of each fund. So when the fund is at the beginning of its cycle of investment, it typically will invest earlier. If you have a super early, extremely costly project or company, and you see a fund who is at the last deal in its fund, they probably won't do it because they're at the end of their investment cycle. So you, as a company, need to understand where the fund is in the life cycle. Similarly, you also need to understand the preferences of each fund. For instance, some funds do like medical devices, other funds don't really do or rarely do devices, and they don't lead. So don't expect a fund that doesn't lead medical device deals to lead your medical device deal. Or they may not do imaging, or they may do lots of oncology or no oncology. You need to know these things. Some funds also have certain special business models. So some funds focus on pure seed, in which case they won't do later stage. Some funds are later stage. Some funds have preferred relationships. So you need to see if what you do fits with the model of the fund. So overlaying basic company dynamics, you also have the dynamics of the fund. And you need to gauge this to see who has the highest probability for eventually investing in your company. Theralis is a big supporter of the healthcare sector. I mean, we've done the two announcements, three funds. The last one being TVM, Theralis, and Eli Lilly last Monday in Montreal. So obviously we're convinced about life sciences as a sector, and it's very important for us to show our conviction to be here, supporting some of our funds here, also trying to see what comes out of the ecosystem here. Not because we can invest directly, but we can perhaps see stuff help our funds. So we want to show support for the sector. We're attending because there's quite a few of the movers and shakers of the sector here, and for us it's a great way to do that. So we're very pleased to be in BioFinance. We have announced, as you know, on Monday, an investment of Theralis needed $65 million as part of $150 million in TVM Capital, alongside with Eli Lilly and a few other investors. And about 2 months ago, at the end of March, we announced an investment in Lumira managed funds because there's actually two funds. There's an earlier stage fund called the Merck Lumira Biosciences Fund, and there's a late stage fund called Lumira Capital 2. Both are managed by Lumira Capital Inc. So we've done that, and we're working on investing some more. We don't have announcements, but we're working on future funds. Those two funds have three things in common which we think are quite important for investing in the space. Number one, they have a critical mass. In our case, we think that the critical mass is at something around 150. Of course, if it can be higher, that's great, but $150 million is something which is meaningful. Number one. Number two, they have an international mindset, and they are bold enough, as I said in my panel, to go out, compare what happens, be a peer of non-Canadian investors, which are often co-investing. They have networks, they can speak to pharma or device companies. It's very important to be able to do that. Number three, they have a relationship with a strategic partner. It happens that in both of those two announcements, there is actually an investment, in the case of TVM, by Eli Lilly and Company, in the case of Lumira, by Merck and Company. Relationships, investments, partnerships with strategic partners is pretty important in that sector. It's becoming much more